I never thought I could feel such terror. Fear of something unseen, something I can't quite define, something I just feel. It's like a constant presence whispering in my ear, telling me something terrible is about to happen. I always thought Maple Creek was a safe town, small and isolated, where everyone knows everyone. But that night, I realized evil can hide anywhere, even here. It was around midnight. I was lying in bed, wrapped in my blanket, trying to fall asleep. The wind outside howled through the trees, and the full moon cast eerie shadows on my bedroom wall. I was almost asleep when I heard the scream. A piercing, desperate scream, cutting through the silence of the night like a knife slicing through skin. My heart raced, and I sat up in bed, body tense. I ran to the window and looked out, hoping to see something, someone, but all I saw was the empty street, dimly lit by the weak streetlights. At first I thought it might have been a dream, that the sound had come from my own mind. But the scream felt so real. I could feel the pain in it, the urgency. I couldn't sleep after that. The next morning I heard about Jessica's disappearance. A young woman from town, only 19 years old. They said she had gone for her usual evening jog and never returned. People began to whisper on street corners, in the grocery lines, in the church aisles. I tried to push away the feeling of unease that consumed me, telling myself it was just a coincidence. That maybe she got lost in the woods. Maybe she decided to leave town. But then, they found the body. I didn't want to see it. I wanted to turn away from the image, but something in me, morbid curiosity, perhaps, forced me to go to the site. The police had cordoned off the area in the woods where they found Jessica. There was a clearing surrounded by old trees, with a circle of stones in the center, like some strange, sinister altar. Her body lay there, on the dirt ground, her eyes still open in a look of absolute terror. My stomach churned. I could hardly breathe. There was something terribly wrong with that scene, something that couldn't be explained with words alone. Jessica's neck was covered in blood, a deep, precise cut. Her lips were stained red, as if they had been painted with her own blood. I felt a wave of nausea rising, but I couldn't look away. Then I saw him. A man, standing at a distance, half hidden by the shadows of the trees. He was watching me. Even from that distance, I felt his piercing gaze, like a cold blade cutting through my skin. He was hooded, but I could see the glint of his eyes. The look of someone who has no soul, who feels nothing but pleasure in witnessing others suffering. I blinked, and he was gone, like a ghost. I backed away, heart pounding in my chest. When I tried to talk about it to someone, no one seemed to have seen the man. Only me. I began to question whether he was real or just a projection of my fear. But deep down, I knew he was there, that he had seen me, chosen me. Since then, I hear the whisper, always present, always around me. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear light footsteps behind me. When I look, I see no one. I hear my name whispered in the wind, see shadows moving on the walls, and always, I have the feeling of being watched. I know he's still out there, and I know that sooner or later, he'll come for me. Since that night, I can't sleep properly. Every noise, every shadow seems to have a hidden purpose, a veiled threat. Jessica's face won't leave my mind, her frozen eyes of fear haunting me with every blink. I don't know if it's guilt for having felt a morbid curiosity to see her, or if it's because I really know deep down that this isn't over. The morning after the body was found, the whole town was in turmoil. It was as if a fog of fear had descended on all of us, suffocating any attempt to return to normalcy. People whispered on the corners, exchanged suspicious glances. Who could have done such a thing? Who could be capable of such cruelty? I was at the corner diner, the same one I used to go to every day, but now the place seemed different. The walls seemed darker, the faces more somber. I couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversations around me.
I heard it was the work of a psychopath,
A woman murmured, looking around to see if anyone was listening.
They say the police have no leads, not a single trace,
Replied the man in front of her, looking worried. I swallowed hard, feeling a shiver run down my spine. That man, the one I saw in the woods, he seemed like a ghost. No one else saw him. No one else even seemed to suspect his existence. Suddenly, I realized I was being watched. A pair of eyes were fixed on me. When I looked up, I saw a man sitting in a dark corner of the diner, his face partially hidden by a hood. The way he stared at me, without blinking, without expression, it made me tremble. I felt as if the air around me had grown thicker, harder to breathe. I knew I had to get out of there. Quickly, I left a bill on the table and got up, trying to seem calm. My heart was racing, and every step seemed to echo louder than the last. When I turned to the door, I felt his gaze still on me. I didn't want to look back, but I couldn't help it. He was still there, motionless, with that cold stare. I pushed the door open and walked out, feeling the cool morning air hit my face. As I walked through the streets, my instincts told me to run, but I kept walking at a brisk pace. The town seemed empty, almost as if it were holding its breath. My footsteps echoed on the cobblestones, and at every corner, I felt like someone was right behind me. When I finally got home, I locked the door and stood there for a moment, trying to calm my breathing. My heart was pounding like it wanted to burst out of my chest. I went to the window and pulled the curtain, peering outside. And there he was, the same man, standing across the street, watching me. I felt panic take over. I called the police. They told me they would send someone to check, but I knew it would be too late. I knew he wouldn't be there when they arrived. I hung up the phone and, even so, kept looking out the window. And then, as I expected, he slowly turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, but the whisper in the wind wouldn't stop. I heard my name in every movement of air. I heard footsteps behind me when I was alone. At night, I felt the weight of a gaze in the darkness. I started to notice small details out of place. Things in my house that I was sure were different. A window slightly open, a door I didn't remember leaving ajar. Small signs that only I seemed to notice. Then the messages started to appear. On the first day, a crumpled note in my mailbox. I see you. Just that, written in small disorderly letters, almost childlike. I threw the note away, trying to ignore the shiver I felt. On the second day, another note, this time left on my door. Do you know what happened to her? I knew it was him. I knew it was the same man I had seen in the woods and at the diner. But how did he know where I lived? How did he know everything? Each passing night, I slept less. My dreams were filled with Jessica's face, her lifeless eyes. And always, I felt his gaze on me, even when he wasn't there. I started to avoid leaving the house. I felt like I was being watched all the time. When I finally went out, to buy food or just breathe some fresh air, it seemed like all eyes were on me. The faces of the people were distorted with worry, with fear. I could see the judgment in their eyes, the suspicion. And then, the news of another missing girl began to spread. This girl, Emily, a 30-year-old woman, a teacher at the local school. She vanished without a trace. People started to connect the dots. The whisper in town grew louder, more frantic. There was a killer among us, but no one knew where he was. No one, except me. That night I couldn't stay home. I grabbed my keys and left without direction, just trying to escape the dread that was suffocating me. I walked through the town, not paying attention to direction or distance, until I found myself once again in front of the woods where Jessica had been found. I don't know why I went there. Maybe it was an attempt to face my fear, to understand. I don't know. But there I was, alone in the darkness. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft, almost loving.
I know you're there. I've always known.
Frozen with fear, I turned slowly, feeling my heart stop for a second. And there he was, closer than ever. So close I could see the malicious gleam in his eyes. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. All I could do was stand there, paralyzed, waiting for the inevitable. I was trapped. I knew it. I felt it. It wasn't just the dark forest around me, with its ancient trees and gnarled branches that seemed like arms trying to grab me. It wasn't just the man in the shadows, with his fixed gaze, cutting like a cold blade against my skin. It was more than that. I was trapped inside my own mind, surrounded by a fear I couldn't fully understand. He was so close now. Close enough for me to smell his breath, a mix of damp earth and something sweet, almost metallic. He didn't move, just looked at me, studying every expression, every reaction. I knew he was enjoying this, feeding off my terror like a cruel predator playing with its prey before making the final move. Finally, I managed to gather enough courage to take a step back. I could hear the sound of dry leaves breaking under my feet. My whole body was trembling. Every nerve fiber in my being screamed for me to run, to flee. But my mind was paralyzed by doubt. He knew who I was, knew where I lived, knew what I had seen. Running would only make him follow me, would only make the chase more thrilling for him. He tilted his head slightly, as if he were curious, as if he were giving me a chance to decide what to do. And then, he spoke for the first time. His voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was a terrifying coldness in every word.
Are you afraid of me?
He asked, his tone almost playful. I wanted to answer, but my throat was dry. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. He took a step forward, and I took another back, stumbling over an exposed root, almost falling.
It's good to be afraid.
He continued, more serious now. Fear makes you aware, but fear can also be a prison you can never escape from. He took another step, and the panic finally broke loose in me like a dam shattering. I turned and ran, not caring about the direction. Branch after branch tore at my skin, leaves slapped against my face, but I kept running. I could hear my own muffled screams in the wind, the sound of my feet pounding against the ground, the blood pounding in my ears. I ran as if my life depended on it, because somehow I knew it did. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the road. My lungs burned and my legs were weak, almost cramping from the effort, but I didn't stop. I kept running until I saw the distant lights of the town. My hands trembled as I tried to pull my phone from my pocket. I called the police again, my words pouring out in a rush of desperation. They said they'd send someone. I knew again it would be too late. He'd be gone by then. That night, I finally succumbed to exhaustion and fell asleep. But sleep brought only more terror. I dreamed of Jessica, her eyes fixed on me, accusing. She tried to speak, but there was no sound, only a whisper, repeating my name over and over, like a lament. I woke up sweating, heart racing, and then I heard it, the same whisper coming from the other side of my door. I was paralyzed, lying in bed, holding my breath. He was out there. I could hear his light breathing, the sound of his hand scratching the wood of the door, slowly, provocatively. I got up slowly, my bare feet barely making a sound on the floor. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, my hands trembling so much that I almost dropped it. I approached the door, putting my ear against it. And then, silence. The most absolute silence I had ever heard. It was as if the world had stopped breathing. I could feel the sweat dripping down my forehead. My muscles were tense, ready for fight or flight. Suddenly, 3 knocks on the door. Strong, quick. I jumped back, my heart pounding in my chest. Another knock, and another. And then, a whisper from the other side.
Are you going to open it?
I knew I couldn't. I didn't know what he would do if I did. But the sound of his voice, the almost playful tone, made me want to scream, made me want to run out the window, anything to escape this living nightmare. And then, another sound. A phone ringing. Not mine. His. A loud, shrill ring that cut through the silence of the night like a knife. For a moment, everything went quiet again. And then, the phone stopped ringing. Heavy footsteps began to move away from the door, slowly. I waited, motionless, each second feeling like an eternity. When I finally got the courage to look through the peephole, he was already gone. But there was something stuck to my door, a crumpled piece of paper. I grabbed it, my hands still shaking, and unfolded it.
Soon.
Just that. He was playing with me, hunting me like an animal. And I knew he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. But what did he want? In the weeks that followed, I tried to return to my routine, pretend that everything was okay. But I knew he was watching me. I could feel it. And then, one night, as I was walking home, I saw something that froze me. In the reflection of a store window, there he was, standing, watching me. He made no move, didn't smile, just stared, like a predator lying in wait, waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew I had to do something, had to fight back. I couldn't be the prey anymore, had to turn the tables. But how do you fight an invisible enemy? How do you escape someone who seems to be everywhere, yet nowhere? I needed to find answers. I needed to figure out who he was before he came after me again. I knew time was running out. Fear was a prison, as he said. But maybe, just maybe, I could use that same prison to trap him. And so, that night, I made a choice. I was going to hunt him. The decision to hunt him seemed insane. Maybe it was. But with each passing day, the fear consumed me more. I couldn't think of anything else. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't work. He had taken over my mind, like a constant shadow that never left me. I knew I had to find a way to confront him, to put an end to this. I started gathering all the information I could about the murders. Jessica was the first, or at least the first we knew of. Then came Emily. I vaguely remembered seeing her a few times. A friendly woman, a teacher, always with a smile on her face. The police hadn't found any clear connection between the two, but I knew there was something. I could feel it. It was almost as if he wanted me to find it. I decided to start my investigation where Jessica was found. I went back to the woods, to the same place where I had seen the man for the first time. I knew it was dangerous, but fear was my fuel now. I needed to understand what had happened. Maybe he had left some clue, something the police hadn't noticed. I was nervous, my hands sweaty as I pushed the branches aside and followed the dark, twisted path. The place was quiet, disturbingly quiet. Not even the birds were singing. The wind whispered in the trees, and I had the feeling the forest was watching me. I reached the clearing where Jessica's body had been found. The circle of stones was still there, like a sinister reminder of what had happened. I looked around, trying to find something, anything that could give me a clue. And then I saw it. There was something on the ground, half covered by leaves. I approached, heart racing, and bent down to pick it up. It was a photo, crumpled and partially torn. My stomach tightened when I saw what was in the photo. It was Jessica, smiling, surrounded by friends at a party. But what made me freeze was something else. Behind her, half hidden in the shadow, I saw a face. His. The same man I had seen that night, the same cold, empty look. I stepped back, almost dropping the photo. How was he there? How was he always one step ahead? I knew it wasn't a coincidence. He wanted me to find that photo. He was playing with me, taunting me, daring me to continue. Suddenly I heard a sound behind me, a rustle of leaves. My whole body tensed, and I turned quickly. There was nothing there, just the wind, whispering among the trees. But I knew he was watching me. I felt his presence, his breath in the air. I put the photo in my pocket and slowly backed away from the clearing, keeping my eyes on my surroundings. My mind was spinning. I needed more information. I needed to understand what was happening before he made another move. I began visiting places where Emily had been seen last. I spoke to her coworkers, her friends, trying to piece together the puzzle. I knew the police had already done all this, but I was trying to find something they had missed, something only I could see. Then, one night, I was in Emily's office, rummaging through her drawers, looking for anything that might make sense. My eyes were tired, my head aching from so much thinking, but I kept going. That's when I found a notebook, hidden in the back of the lowest drawer. It was a hard-covered notebook with pages filled with notes, drawings, and scribbles. I began flipping through, and soon realized it was a diary. The first pages were normal, accounts of her daily life, her classes, her usual worries. But as I went on, things started to change. There were darker notes, crossed-out words, as if Emily were afraid of something but didn't want to admit it. Then, on one of the last pages, I found an entry that made me freeze. He's watching me. I know he is. I feel his presence everywhere I go. He smiles at me, but it's a hollow smile, without a soul. I see his eyes following me. Yesterday I thought I saw him in the window, but when I went to look, he wasn't there. I think I'm going crazy. I need to tell someone, but who would believe me? The diary fell from my hand. My heart was racing. She had seen him too. Emily knew he was around, felt the same fear I felt. But unlike her, I wouldn't be his next victim. I left the office with the diary in hand, the pages crumpled from gripping it so tightly. I needed to think, needed to find a pattern, something that connected Jessica and Emily to this man. Something that could help me understand why he had chosen these women, and why he now seemed to be choosing me. I spent the entire night combing through my memories, trying to find a detail, a connection. But the more I thought about it, the more it became clear that I was involved somehow, even if I couldn't understand how or why. Then, an idea began to form in my head. If he was always one step ahead, maybe he was watching my investigation, monitoring my every move. Maybe he was waiting for me to make a mistake. That's when I decided to set a trap. If he wanted to play, then I would play his game. If he wanted to watch me, then I would give him something to watch. But this time I would be prepared. This time, I would be the one hunting. I prepared a simple plan. I would go back to the woods, but this time, I wouldn't go alone. I would take my phone, record everything, document every move, every sound. And if he was there, if he dared to come close, I would catch him in the act. The next night, I went to the woods, heart pounding, fear ever present, but a new determination growing inside me. The wind was colder than usual, and the darkness seemed denser, more oppressive. But I didn't care. I was ready. I started walking, every step carefully calculated. I heard the rustle of leaves, the sound of branches breaking under my feet, and kept moving forward. The silence around me was almost deafening. And then I heard it. A whisper. Soft, almost imperceptible, but definitely there.
I know what you're doing.
I stopped, blood freezing in my veins. I looked around, trying to find the source of the sound, but there was nothing. Just shadows and darkness.
You think you can catch me?
The whisper continued, closer this time, almost in my ear. I swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. I gripped the phone in my hand, the recorder still running. I needed to lure him out, needed him to reveal himself. "Who are you?" I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. And then, the laugh. A low, rough laugh that made my heart race. I turned quickly, and there he was, just a few feet away, his face obscured by the darkness. But his eyes shone with a cold madness, an almost childlike excitement. He took a step toward me, and I knew it was now or never. I raised the phone, pointing the camera at him, and said firmly, "I know what you did, and you're going to pay for it." But instead of hesitating, he just smiled more, as if he were enjoying the situation.
You think you can catch me?
He repeated, voice soft, almost a whisper.
You think you know who I am?
My heart was beating so fast I thought he might hear it. And then, before I could react, he turned and vanished into the shadows, as quickly as he had appeared. I stood there, frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. He was taunting me, testing my reactions. But this time, I had something of his. I had his voice. I had his image, even if just for a second. I knew I still didn't have all the answers, but I was closer than ever. Now, he knew I was willing to face him, and I knew he wouldn't stop until one of us was left standing. That night, I went home with my heart still racing, but with a new determination. I was no longer the prey. I was on the hunt. After the encounter in the woods, my mind was a whirlwind. I felt I was closer to the truth, but something was still eluding me. With every step I took, with every clue I found, I felt the game was becoming more deadly. He was toying with me, controlling my moves like a puppet master. I spent days reviewing every detail, the photos, the newspaper clippings, the police files. There was something I was missing, something that didn't make sense. Amanda Green seemed to be the key to unraveling all of this. I decided to find her. If she knew something about the victims, maybe she knew something about me too. When I reached Amanda's apartment, I knocked on the door hard, my heart racing. No response. I tried again, this time harder. Finally the door opened, and there she was, looking tired and tense. Her eyes studied me carefully, as if trying to decipher something in me. I know who he is, Amanda, I lied, trying to sound confident. I think I know what he wants. She watched me in silence for a moment before stepping aside and letting me in. The apartment was messy, with papers scattered everywhere. Amanda had gotten as involved as I had, maybe even more. The fear was visible in her eyes.
Sit down,
She said, pointing to the couch.
we need to talk about what's really going on.
I sat down, trying to ignore the trembling in my hands. She began to talk about the killer, about how he chose his victims, how he watched them, how he loved to toy with their minds. I listened intently, but as she spoke, a strange feeling grew in my chest, a feeling of disturbing familiarity. Amanda kept talking, but her words began to blur. They became distant, almost like an echo. I felt like I was looking at her through a veil, a curtain that obscured my vision. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my head, and images began to emerge. Memories. But whose? They were fragments, flashes of faces, screams, blood. A circle of stones, the woods, the knife. And then, a laugh. My laugh. I stood up, gasping, holding my head in my hands. Amanda looked at me with concern.
Are you okay?
She asked, approaching. But I could barely hear. The memories kept assaulting me, like a river overflowing. And then, the truth began to emerge, like a monster rising from the depths. I knew suddenly with crushing clarity that no one was watching me. I was the monster. I tried to focus, but the pain in my head was unbearable. Images kept invading my mind. Jessica, Emily, all the victims. I saw them, but not as victims of a killer. I saw them as my victims. My body started to shake, and suddenly everything became clear. The killer had never been out there. He had always been inside me. Amanda seemed to say something, but I couldn't hear. Her voice was a distant murmur, a fly buzzing in my ears. I looked at my hands and saw red stains. Blood. I recoiled, horrified. But then another memory came back with force. I saw myself in the woods, holding the knife. I saw the fear in Jessica's eyes when I grabbed her. I saw Emily pleading for her life while I smiled. I saw them all. And then I saw myself, laughing, enjoying every moment. Amanda took a step back, realizing something was terribly wrong.
You need help.
She whispered. But I knew it was too late for help. Everything I had imagined, everything I thought was a hunt, had been an illusion created by my own mind to hide the truth. I was the killer. I had been from the start. Suddenly, I felt a strange calm wash over me. There was no need to fight it anymore. The truth was there, naked and raw. I was the monster I feared so much. The whisper, the presence, the voice I heard in the wind. It was all me. My own mind playing tricks on me. I looked at Amanda, and I saw the terror in her eyes. She knew now, and I couldn't let her go. Without thinking, without hesitating, I lunged. I heard her scream as I pushed her against the wall, my hands finding her neck. Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic take over her. But I felt no remorse. I felt only a strange satisfaction. It was as if I were finally accepting who I really was. She tried to fight, but I was stronger. And then, finally, her body relaxed, and her eyes closed. The silence filled the room. I let her go, her body falling to the floor. I looked at my hands again. They were stained with blood. Her blood. But this time, I didn't feel fear. I felt freedom. I went back home, my heart still racing, but my mind finally clear. I began to realize all the signs I had ignored, all the clues that were right before my eyes. The whisper in the wind, that constant gaze I felt, were my own thoughts, my own dark desires revealing themselves. I looked around my house, seeing every object as if for the first time. The table, where I found the notes. I had written them myself. The doors that were always open. I had left them that way. All the chaos, all the madness came from within me. I went to the mirror and looked at my reflection. My eyes were different, darker, deeper. I smiled, and it was the first time I saw my own true smile, a smile of understanding. I had been the victim and the executioner. The whisper in the darkness had always been my own voice, calling me to accept who I really was, a predator, a hunter. And now, finally, I accepted that. And for the first time in a long time, I laughed. A low, rough laugh, full of a disturbing truth. The only truth that mattered. The game was never over, and maybe it should never end.